Welcome to the Banff World Media Festival. Your session is about to begin.
Good morning. Thanks for being here. It's my privilege today to do a Q&A with Frank Giustra, who amongst many titles and job positions is the CEO of Fiore Capital, president of the Radcliffe Foundation, founder of the Clinton Giustra Sustainable Growth Initiative, the founder of Lionsgate Entertainment, currently a board member, and as he put it, an all-around nice guy. He's many, many more things, which we're going to learn a little bit about today. But when Frank and I were discussing doing this, we thought the best path would be to delve into his beginnings and how he got started in the business and how that evolved into a kind of a core set of principles of investment and business and creative excellence. I have known Frank for 14 years, since I first began at Lionsgate in 1998, and have had a happy friendship ever since. And I was thrilled 2 years ago when he rejoined the board and expressed an interest in television, which has created the Sea to Sky venture, which we're doing with his Thunderbird company. And we have a lot more reasons to talk daily, and not just about this amazing olive oil, which we'll get to in a moment as well. So I'm just going to launch in, and we'll go from there. We're both kind of on a little bit of a rush schedule, so we're not going to do Q&A afterwards, but hopefully this will be revealing. So Frank, you've written about your early business career and the idea of associating yourself with talented and successful people. Can you recount how that became one of your guiding principles?
Yeah, when you start out, and I was fortunate. I started in business. I was thrown into the business world quite young, at the age of 20. And when you realize that you don't know anything, you should listen a lot and talk less. And that's exactly what I like to do. And I love to observe people, especially talented people that I admired, that I thought were good at their craft. And I would look for whatever qualities or traits they had that allowed them to either influence people or effectively get things done. And I would pick up on those things, and they would work very well over the years. So I'm sort of a product of having met a whole number of people through the years that I've really admired, and just picked up the certain little elements that help in getting business deals done.
Well, early on, I think I read, or you told me about being in the UK, and you were in the investment world. And I think there was a particular piece of business or an investor or someone you worked with, and that principle hit home. And you said from then on, it was like, go with the best.
Yeah, absolutely. I think I know which one I was talking about. Yes, it was a fellow who will rename nameless, but he was very, very good at what he did, and he knew how to. He mastered the art of corralling people, selling the vision, and then getting them to act on his vision. And it's all about salesmanship in this world. I don't know if you've seen, ever read the book by Peter Guber, The Winner, what's it called? Winner? Tell to Win. Tell to Win, that's it. Yes, I read that a few months back, and it's, he makes a very interesting point. He says that if you pitch by telling stories, that you win the heart of your audience, you will win your way to their wallet. Right. So this fellow that I met, some close to 30 years ago, did that very well and taught me that very, very valuable lesson.
Gotcha. When did you become attracted to the media side of business?
Well, when I started dabbling in this business, I'm not sure I called it the media business. I was interested in the film business.
Okay.
And this was 11 years before even Lionsgate was conceptualized. And by a set of circumstances, I found myself in Los Angeles and quickly met some movie people. And those movie people took no time at all to fleece me out of a very large part of my net worth. And I learned a very valuable lesson about that. But I thought, there's got to be something else to this. And I wanted to see, is there an intelligent way to get into this business? And so by chatting with a lot of people, I ran across an industry veteran who convinced me that the foreign sales business was an intelligent, reasonable, low-risk way to get into the business. So we created a company called the Movie Group back in 1986 and started selling in the foreign marketplace, independently produced films. And eventually we got into executive producing As a matter of fact, I co-executive produced one of my first films with Tim Gamble, who's my partner in Thunderbird. That was a 1988 film called Cadence with Charlie Sheen and Martin Sheen. Mm-hmm. And we've been friends ever since. But yeah, that's how I got into it. And I stayed dabbling in that business really because I was running an investment bank. So I was doing this more of a part-time thing throughout the years, right up until the time that I thought about Lionsgate.
And how did Lionsgate begin? It was a public offering in a time when public offerings were pretty exciting.
Well, yeah, Lionsgate had a very good beginning. It was, I was about 39 and a half, and I'd always promised myself that I would leave the investment banking world by the age of 40 for my own reasons, and I did. I left chairman and CEO of a firm called Yorkton Securities, which I'd been at for 17 years. And it wasn't until after I left and after I'd been unemployed for 6 months that I started to think about what to do next. And the concept of Lionsgate kind of came up, and the idea was very simple. In concept, it was simple. It was to create an American-style Hollywood studio, but based in Canada. Mm-hmm. And so I set out to do that, and I'd been very fortunate because I had lots of institutional backing because I'd just come off a great win of running Yorkton and creating that into a really well-known institutional boutique. So many institutions decided that I was putting up my own money, they would put up their money side by side, and we launched Lionsgate, and we had the early part of was very exciting, and there was lots of enthusiasm, but that quickly went away.
Then you met Peter Guber.
I met Peter Guber.
Along the way. That really turned you southward, right?
And Peter, I did a deal with Peter. It was probably not the best deal for me, but in the end, I learned a lot of lessons there. But we did some other very exciting things, too. I mean, working with CFP, a film distributor that we'd bought in Canada. We had Lionsgate in the beginning was sort of an amalgam of a number of existing operations in the entertainment business: physical studios, animation, television. Well, we created television from scratch, but film distribution, etc. And the idea was to bring it all together under one roof and create something quite dynamic. And I remember some of the early conversations I would have with the people that were already in these organizations that had been there for many years, hardened people that lived deal by deal in a very, very difficult industry. And me coming in with this grand picture, and I just think that a lot of them were sitting around thinking I was a complete nut. But they stuck around, and I really admired. They enjoyed their craft. They were very good at what they did, and they worked very hard. So it was the beginnings were easy in that sense. But things got difficult in the first couple of years. Things didn't happen as quickly and as easily as I had hoped. The shine wore off our share price. We were kind of abandoned by the street. And it was a real struggle. It was probably the single biggest career challenge that I've ever faced in anything I've ever done. It was the most difficult couple of years. Were the 2 years after I launched Lionsgate. And I remember lying in bed in the middle of the night staring at the ceiling thinking, how and why did I do this? Why am I here? I didn't need to be here. I could have been retired. But thankfully, we had very good pieces in the organization. And eventually in 2000, with some help from a good friend, Michael Burns, we managed to put together the right management team to run Lionsgate, and I was able to move up to chair, which is where I should have been in the first place. And they are the same people that still run it today, John Feldheimer, Michael Burns et al., and they've done a fantastic job. I mean, it just gives me great pride to travel around the world these days and have people tell me, what a great organization Lionsgate is. It just fills me with a lot of pride.
That's great. That's great. When you stepped aside from the company in 2001, you rededicated yourself to the resources business with incredible results. What were you reading in the market at that point, at that inflection point that told you there was going to be gold in them dar hills?
Well, actually, I stayed on as chair until 2003, but John didn't come on. He came on in 2000, and by 2001, I had developed this theory, and it was the basic premise of the theory was that the US dollar was going to go down dramatically against other currencies and against other assets such as gold. And I actually wrote 2 papers on the topic in 2001 and 2002. I mean, I could sit here and talk about this for hours, but that would take up the entire session. So if you're interested, Google the tarnished dollar and the good, the bad, and the ugly. Those were the 2 papers. And they were published in 01 and 02, and it makes for some very interesting reading 10 years later. And so basically, I made a prediction about what was happening in America with the US dollar and what was going to happen with gold. And as a result, I adjusted my portfolio accordingly and sold all my US dollars and went heavily into gold. But more importantly, I took it one step further, and I thought, you know, if this is actually happening, I need to be in the business of doing what I do best. And in my investment banking days, I was mostly in mining finance. So I decided to create a number of mining and oil companies that would exploit properties around the world to take advantage of this commodities boom that I saw coming. And I think we nailed it. I mean, in hindsight, it was a pretty good move.
Yeah, clearly. You formed with former President Bill Clinton the Clinton Giustra Sustainable Growth Initiative. What is it? You dedicated a lot of your own personal resources to it and kind of an ongoing commitment, as I understand it. Can you tell us what it is and what its mission is?
Yeah, I think it probably might serve us to just the background, because there was a reason how this thing evolved. I mean, I met Clinton in 2005 when I was I threw an event at my home to raise money for the tsunami relief effort. And as you know, Bill Clinton was one of the UN ambassadors for the relief effort. And so a friend of ours convinced him to provide a videotaped message to our guests who were providing a lot of money for this thing and thanking them for their work. And through that, I was connected to his people, and it wasn't long before I got an introduction, and we hit it off. We hit it off the first day we met. I remember we were flying from New York to Little Rock, and we just hit it off. We had similar interests, similar backgrounds in terms of how we were raised, et cetera, et cetera. And so I spent the next few months traveling around the world with him, learning what he was up to. And he was doing some very cool things, especially in the area of HIV/AIDS, and what he had achieved, which had been a very big challenge for providing affordable antiretroviral drugs to the developing world. He created a method by which he could lower the price dramatically of these antiretroviral drugs. And I made a pledge to him, and I provided him with a lot of money, of my own money, about 30 million or so, and then raised him a lot more from other people I knew. We threw a number of events, and we raised a lot of money. So I spent a couple of years just doing that with him, traveling around the world, getting to know him, supporting his initiative. And in 2007, I came up with an idea. And the genesis of the idea came from the fact that I had spent a lifetime traveling around the developing world from my mining finance days, where I'd witnessed a lot of poverty. And I was very familiar with the mining industry. And the mining industry has a very unique problem. It goes, and by the way, the mining operates in almost every developing country in the world. There's mining is everywhere. But they have an interesting dilemma in that, by definition, their economic contribution to that region, that community, has a lifespan, because a mine is a depleting asset. So they come into a place, they invest, there's economic activity, they leave, and it's gone. And although many mining companies were willing to invest in corporate social responsibility projects, they were the traditional things that are easy to do, mostly one-off infrastructure projects: build a bridge, build a school, build a hospital, do something that's a one-off. You've done your thing for the community. And some mining companies had dabbled in things that were more sustainable, but without a lot of success, because that's not the business they were in. So I went to Bill Clinton. I said, listen, I've got this great idea about creating sustainable development in these regions where mining takes place. Do you like it? He says he liked it. So I spent the next 3-4 months canvassing the mining industry and securing support that would allow us, with the help and support of the mining industry, to create partnerships where we'd go into these regions and with Bill Clinton's celebrity and his organization skills, bring together existing programs that were working somewhat but needed to be refined, scaled, tweaked in some way to make them bigger and more effective than they were. And so that's, I convinced enough companies to do that. And so I went back to Bill Clinton and said, okay, I will pledge $100 million. And then I went to Carlos Slim, who's the richest man in the world, and I said, I'm pledging 100. Will you pledge 100? And he said yes. And so now we had 200 million pledged for the start of this program in Latin America. And we started in Colombia and Peru, Mexico, and eventually we got to Haiti. And the essence of what we are trying to do is to alleviate poverty by creating sustainable, market-based development that create jobs and raise income levels in a way that is sustainable, meaning that once we help organize whatever it is we're organizing, we can eventually leave and it will have a life of its own. That was ultimately the most important thing we were trying to achieve. So over the last 5 years, we've been at it 5 years now, we've dabbled in many programs in these countries, everything from the supply chain for tourism and hotel industry in certain areas of Latin America, to construction training for low-income housing, to creating agricultural co-ops that allow for a stronger purchasing power for their input and a better pricing power for their products, develop markets for them, got them organically certified, did all sorts of things, brought in people that could train them in better techniques of agriculture. We've provided almost 50,000 cataract surgeries in Peru, which was about 80% of the known problem. Wow. We're going to do this again in another part of South America with the same program, and many, many more programs. Now, in 5 years, we've learned, because we have a very strict monitoring and evaluation process, and we have to convince ourselves that we're getting results. And so we've gone through a learning curve of things that work, and things that either need to be tweaked or dropped. And so we're very tough on that because we're trying to bring it down to one or two big picture ideas that are really scalable and that we can take to other countries. Because again, the idea is we're in several countries now, but this sort of thing is very applicable with the support of mining companies and others all over the world. And that's my goal. This is a lifetime job for me. So.
Well, that's a great segue into my larger question about philanthropy. It's obviously a huge part of your life. And my question is, was that always part of the plan? Or did you come to that later and realize that was something you needed to do or wanted to do?
Although I've been giving since I was yay high, these things evolve, okay? There was, I can't say there was ever a plan in my life. Life doesn't work that way. You kind of evolve into these things. I was giving from a very early age, but as I became more financially successful, I started to find ways to give more and more and more. But it wasn't really till I met Bill Clinton that my whole perspective on the world changed, and I made a very conscious decision to focus most of my attention on philanthropy and less on business. I mean, I still like to do business, but I've spent more time on all the various philanthropic things I'm involved in than any one business thing. So it's one of these things that just evolves.
Got it. Everybody's watched with interest the Facebook offering, the highs and lows, and you've obviously been raised with a kind of culture of service, and you've built it as you've built your career. Do you think the new age entrepreneurs, the Mark Zuckerbergs of the world, are going to continue that tradition, or are they less rooted in?
Yeah, I don't know. I can't speak to Mark. Everybody has a different approach. I'll tell you what I have noticed, that with the new generation, today's generation, not mine, they are much more socially conscious than we ever were. They're better organized, they communicate better, they're better interconnected, they have access to better information, and the level of social entrepreneurship that's taking place, and I travel all over the world, and I talk to these young people, and I'm quite impressed by how different it is from when we grew up. When we grew up, write a check to your favorite cause. There's so much more involvement now, and the whole approach to philanthropy has changed over the last 10 years in a very big way, both by corporations and by individuals. No longer is it acceptable to just write a check. People want to know that that money is well spent. So they get actively involved in understanding what the business plan of spending that money is, that it is being evaluated, it's been monitored, that they can see the results, they can measure the results, and then they can decide whether their money is going into a black hole or not. So, traditional conventional aid has been replaced with this whole new approach, social entrepreneurship, to philanthropy, that I think is a really good thing, because when people see results, they want to participate more. It motivates them to do more. Whereas I remember growing up, you would write a check to something, you had no idea whether it was working or not.
So they're seeing the story. The
Exactly.
story has to be told and real. Some among us here know that Lionsgate was named for the Lionsgate Bridge in Vancouver. You've been a proud Western Canadian your whole life. What do you love about British Columbia and Vancouver, and why, when so many other Canadian business leaders are in Toronto, do you stay out west?
Well, for 2 months of the year, it's the most beautiful place on the planet. And for the other 10 months, it's 2.5 hours from Los Angeles. And it's true, folks. I mean, it's absolutely true. I mean, I was reminded driving up here yesterday, coming up to Banff, what an absolutely spectacular part of the world we live in. This is an unbelievable part of the world, and Vancouver is equally as beautiful. And it's a very casual lifestyle. Great outdoors, people are friendly, great place to raise children if you have small children. And it happens to be the center for two businesses that I really like, mining and filmed entertainment. Listen, nothing against Toronto people. I'm sure there are Toronto people in the crowd. I just, my body's not designed for the cold. I just can't take it. I remember walking down King Street one day in February, and my face almost fell off. I just can't, I'm sorry, I can't take it. I mean, wonderful city in the summer.
Got it. You rejoined the Lionsgate board in the last year or two. Why rejoin at that point? What brought that about?
Serendipity. It's funny. I remember I was driving. It was a sunny fall day, and I was driving a convertible on the east coast of the United States, minding my own business, and the phone rings, and it's Michael Burns. Parenthetically, Michael Burns is the fellow that helped me. He was most instrumental in turning Lionsgate around back in 2000. He's the one that convinced John to come on as CEO, and so I have great regard for him. Love the man. So he calls me and he says, you're probably going to say no, but we'd love for you to come back on the board of Lionsgate. And then he peppered it with a bunch of ego strokes and all nice things he's saying about me. He happens to be one of the greatest salesmen I've ever met. And so I said, I'll think about it. I need to sleep on this, And for me, it was an emotional decision. Here's the company I founded, ran and chaired, and then coming back on as a director. So I did sleep on it. My gut told me it was the right move. It was the right thing to do. It felt right. I knew most of the board and the key management. They were all the same people that were there when I was there, and they were people I respected. So, yeah, why not?
Well, and I need to thank you, because all of us at Lionsgate owe you a debt of gratitude for helping us fend off a corporate raider in Carl Icahn, and that was in that era. You joined at a very volatile and vulnerable point, and thank you for doing that. What did you find 10 years or 9 or 10 years after leaving? What had changed, and what things were the same, and what got you excited once you kind of dug in and started meeting with everybody?
I was going through the board orientation process, which you have to do as a new board member, where you get to meet everybody and all the department heads and find out everything. And I was thinking, oh my God, this company is humongous. It's grown by leaps and bounds. I barely recognize parts of it. But I'll tell you what was really interesting, and it was very heartwarming to see. After I attended a few board meetings, what hadn't been lost was the entrepreneurial spirit that was there at the beginning, which made Lionsgate great. And I was really happy to see that that was still part of the fabric. You know, it was still there, and that's what will make you guys continue to succeed, because you have to stay entrepreneurial, you have to stay lean and mean, and that culture is still part of the way you guys operate.
Oh, that's great. Thank you. Well, speaking of entrepreneurial, tell us a little bit about Thunderbird, your film and television venture here in Canada. Sounds like your love of movies and television continues to flourish.
Well, yeah, Thunderbird, again, I was chatting about my friend Tim Gamble earlier. You know, we've been friends forever, and a few years ago, he approached me and made me aware that the underlying rights, half of the underlying rights to Blade Runner were potentially available for sale, because the fellow that owned half the rights was getting older and wanted to divest. Now, Blade Runner happens to be my favorite sci-fi movie of all time. It's just an amazing movie. And so we had numerous conversations, and I decided that this was possibly something I wanted to own. And Tim came up with a much better idea. He said, you know, well, why don't you put your money into Thunderbird? You know, we're a television production company, been around 8 years, successfully doing a number of TV shows that are on the air, developing a whole number of other shows, and doing sales work for other companies. And so put your money into Thunderbird, allow Thunderbird to buy the Blade Runner rights, and now you become a big shareholder of Thunderbird. And I thought, well, that's a really good idea. I know Tim, I trust him, I like what he's doing. It's a profitable business. So that's what we did. So I put my money into Thunderbird and became a significant shareholder. I put more money in since when we did the whole Sea to Sky thing. But that's how that came about. And I like Tim's style. And again, Tim is about making money. He's not trying to make a statement. He runs his organization lean and mean. And I admire him for that.
And Thunderbird, along with Lionsgate, announced a venture which is Sea to Sky, also based on a British Columbia highway name. And where do you see that going? What are the goals from your perspective? What's the aim?
Well, you know, it's funny you asked that, because you're a very big part of this. But this all started post my Thunderbird investment, and after I came back on the board of Lionsgate, I became reconnected with Kevin, who I've known since he was 12. When he joined in 1998, we hired him. He had a very boring job as a producer of Baywatch, and we convinced him to come and run our scripted side of our television business. And we started conversations about the TV business in general, and about some opportunities that existed in the TV business. I had some ideas that I wanted to pitch creatively of things that I might want to do as one-offs. Then I had further conversations with Tim Gamble, and I brought him into the conversation, and all of a sudden, it became a much bigger idea. And the idea was in essence, to create a brand new label, which we call Sea to Sky. And what that is a 50-50 joint venture between Lionsgate and Thunderbird, where we're going to have creative deals in place in-house and develop programming for the networks. We already have several deals in place. The objective here is to own content, and I think that the combination of the talents of this group, will allow us to bring more and very fresh ideas to the table. We'll have the resources to own the content and retain as many rights as possible. And I think that's really ultimately the most important thing in doing this business. So where do we go in the long run? I mean, you never know these things. I'll tell you what my experience has been with these things, okay? My life experience with almost every major deal I've started is that it starts out with a vision which is much smaller than where it eventually evolves. And this happened with Yorkton, it happened with Lionsgate, it happened with Wheaton River Gold Corp, Pacific Rubiales, my oil company, my relationship with Bill Clinton. All of these things started with some smallish idea that somehow developed a life of its own and became something very large. So what do I hope for Sea to Sky? It might be too early to tell, but I think the idea is to create a lot of very fresh and innovative content that we own. We want to own our content. That's what this business is all about. You know, you've got the world is evolving out there. You know, there are different channels of delivery, there's new markets being opened up, there's all sorts of ways that content is finding its way to the eyeballs out there, but content is king. And
Right.
although it will evolve, it's still going to be about telling stories. And we're in the business of telling stories through filmed product that we want to own, sell, resell forever. That's our
Fantastic.
business.
One of the things you mentioned in our conversations even earlier in this talk was the concept of serendipity. And it goes to your point about things starting small and getting bigger. So sitting between us is a nitrogen-sealed canister of your amazing olive oil. And this is a serendipitous story, and it actually is a small thing that began as kind of a hobby and now is a real business. So can you tell the room about how this began and what it's all about?
Yeah, this is my newest thing, but it's also evolved into something that I think is going to be quite big. It started. I'm Italian by background. I grew up on the Mediterranean diet. My parents raised me on a Mediterranean diet, which is mostly a lot of vegetables, big use of olive oil. My father had a garden where he grew everything under the sun, and that's how we lived our lives, with really healthy foods. Later in life, loved to travel to Italy. So every summer we travel to Italy. And a friend of mine has a villa there in Orvieto, which is in Umbria, and became one of our summer traditions to go there and eat great foods. And there's always great foods there. And she had a few trees on her property and had her oil pressed every year, and we tried this oil. And this is at a time when I knew nothing about oil. I bought my Bertolli just like anybody else would at Safeway. But there was something interesting about this oil. I tasted it, I go, wow, this is delicious. This is really good stuff. And so my friend took me up to the local guy, which had the only press to press the olives in the region, and he was making his own oil for the restaurants. And I tasted his oil, and I thought, oh my God, this is even better. And I came back and said, I want to do this. But let's first do a little test. So I took some of their oil, and then we went out and purchased from all the high-end stores the most expensive olive oils we could buy. We brought them back to Canada, and we had a blind taste test, with a number of restaurateurs and foodie-type people. And guess what? This oil kind of ranked number one, number two. So we knew we were onto something. So I thought, okay, now let's go there. Let's make it happen. Let's start acquiring these estates. We started to assemble all of this land. And it happens to be in an excellent location, which was an ancient seabed on this one side of the hill of Orvieto, which is still laden with shells and fossils, very mineral-rich, limestone-rich soil. And it's at the perfect elevation where the fruit flies don't attack the fruit, and you avoid the rancid taste that happens when the eggs are laid into the fruit by the fruit flies. And so we have this naturally great product that tastes great. We pick it and we press it the same day, and it's in the bottles, okay? That's how quickly it happens. It's picked by hand. And then we thought, okay, what are the other elements that ruin oil? Time. Oil is not wine. It doesn't get better with time. It gets worse with time, so you want to have it fresh. Light, heat, and oxygen, the big killers of oil. So we tried to eliminate all of these by stainless steel bottle, nitrogen sealed, so no oxygen hits it. So it keeps it cool, keeps the light away, and we ship it quickly back home. So we gave a lot of it away last year just to get a feedback, and then this year we decided we were going to sell it. So we're selling it as an ultra-premium olive oil that is getting a lot of rave reviews, and it's already won a few gold medals, won another one yesterday in Jerusalem, and I think it's going to be the best olive oil in the world, and it really is. I mean, it's just a fantastic oil.
And what we've learned, because I've now been a little bit been educated somewhat on olive oil, is that this is not for cooking. This is only for eating, drizzled across vegetables, bread, anything on your plate.
Soups, meats, you name it. It's a finisher, and it just makes everything taste better.
When you're not managing the oil business, both oil from the ground and oil from trees, what do you do for fun?
Cook. That's my number one thing. I love to cook. I'm obsessed with cooking, and I love cooking for large groups of people, usually 15 to 20, sometimes 30 people in my home. I love spending the day shopping for the ingredients. I love spending the day in the kitchen preparing 4 or 5 dishes. And then I love everybody hanging around the kitchen, drinking wine, and where the kitchen becomes the center of the universe. It's the best way to have fun in a social environment that I can think of. Cooking, everybody together in the kitchen, and eating great foods. I love doing it.
Excellent. Few people have logged as many miles as you have crisscrossing the globe, and you've seen the world, and you've seen economic trends. You predicted the commodities boom. You predicted the demise of the American dollar. What's your broad take on the Eurozone and its impact on us and the economic crisis happening over there?
Yeah, that's a real tough one. I think the best you can hope for in Europe, and I mean the best you can hope for, is that they don't fall off a cliff soon, and they find some way to muddle through the next few years, and during that time, they restructure the structure of what the European Union looks like. I think that right now you've got Germany holding out as really the only holdout country that is not allowing what the entire world wants to see Europe do, which is to print money in essence, to do what America did, what China's not doing, what Japan is doing, what some of the BRIC countries are doing. The whole world's printing money right now, some in larger amounts than others, and the European Central Bank is really in essence controlled by Germany. They have the final say, and they're not allowing this to happen yet. My sense is that they will blink under international pressure, and they will print money, which is the only thing that would allow, if you print massive amounts of money, it puts a floor on any potential falling off a cliff. You know, you haven't fixed the problems. The problems are still the same. The design of Europe is fundamentally flawed. It's a monetary union without a political union, and that just doesn't work. You can't have one without the other. And so eventually they're going to have to restructure what Europe is, or else it's going to break up, either partially break up or completely break up. But in the meantime, I think you're going to see years of very anemic growth, double, triple-dipped recessions, much of what you've seen in Japan over the last 20 years or so. And I don't think that's the good news. That's the good scenario. The bad scenario could, I'm not sure you want to even go there with the bad scenario. But listen, America's no different. I wrote an article 6 months ago. If you want to look it up, it's called We've Been Down This Path Before, which addresses the American and the European situation. And what amazes me is that how many experts don't see the simple math of what's going on here, because it's simple math. The deficit spending, the debt that's piling up, there's no way out of this unless you print money. And America's done a lot of it already since the 2008 crisis, and I'm telling you, they will do more. It's not over yet. You will get what they refer to as QE3, which is quantitative easing, which in essence means printing more money. America will do it, China's doing it, the Europeans will have to, I'm sure, do it. And in essence, what happens is that you create so much of this money that the world becomes awash with money, and eventually that manifests itself in inflation. And the value of money goes down relative to things, and that's monetary inflation. So things could be anything like gold, it can be other commodities, or it could be, real estate, you name it. As you print more money, you're basically devaluing one thing against another, so you're making the other one more valuable. So inflation will manifest itself down the road. Not yet, but down the road it's going to come, and it's going to come it's going to be very, very ugly.
And what is a long-term structural fix? Just take the U.S. for now, because the Eurozone is even more complicated. How do they and other Western developed nations get out of that cycle?
Well, part of their problem is demographics, and that's something that's really hard to fix, because as you have an aging population, you have to support that aging population, and your workforce shrinks. The supporting workforce shrinks. So both Japan has that problem, Europe has that problem, and America has that problem. But the real structural fix of America, which happened over a period of over a generation, and it would take another generation to fix, is to take it from a consumption society into a production society. So America became a domestic economy as opposed to an exporting economy over the years, and that has to they have to find some way to turn that back in a very difficult environment where the world's become very competitive, where products are made cheaper in other countries. They have to accept a lower, I hate to say this, but to be competitive, you have to accept a lower wage.
Standard of living.
And lower standard of living. So those are all, if you're a politician and you're trying to get elected as president or a congressman, if you start telling that to your public, you're not going to get elected. And so they don't. And that's why this thing will, there is no will. I don't think the will or courage is there. And I don't think that the political system is structured such that will allow for that kind of very difficult change to take place. So what will they do instead? They will do what everybody throughout history has done. Everybody. And the other thing I love to do is read history books. And one thing that I've learned out of history books is that study the behavioral patterns of humans throughout history. You will see, King Solomon said it best 3,000 years ago, there's nothing new under the sun, and it applies today. And every time great nations get into these sort of minds, which they all do, it's the natural evolution of a great nation, they will borrow, and then they will devalue their currency. And that's exactly what's going to happen now with America. You see it now. You've got plus $1 trillion deficits every year. They've printed a hell of a lot of money. They're going to have to print a lot more. And so they're going to destroy the currency to save the nation. But, there's a price to pay for that.
Right. The Banff World Media Festival celebrates creative excellence in an amazing setting. It's a worldwide festival with a Canadian accent. What can you tell the delegates here today about following their dreams in the way that you followed yours?
Simple, just do it. Whatever it is you're going to do it and be bold. Don't be afraid. Don't be afraid to make mistakes. I don't know if you've ever seen, there's a great video, Steve Jobs, his 2005 commencement speech at Stanford. Have you ever seen it? Never seen it? I recommend everybody in this room watch that video. It's absolutely amazing. And he says some very interesting things in there about following your dreams. Find something you love to do, and you will do great work. And if you don't find it, keep looking, because you've got one shot at this, and you got to get it right. So keep looking. If you're not happy with what you do, keep moving. And then he says that a very interesting thing about what motivates him, and it's about death. It's about the prospect of death, and it's something that I've lived by my whole life. Just if you think about it logically, he goes, remembering that you are facing death is the best way, I know, he said, to avoid the trap of thinking you have something to lose. You're already naked. There is no reason not to follow your heart. And he talks about things like fear, pride, failure, falling away, all in the face of death. So think about that for a moment. Think the logic of that. We're all going to go. What have you got to lose? Go for it. Make mistakes. I've made tons of mistakes. Just be smart enough to know to learn from your mistakes and fix them. But you have to follow your heart. Whatever you do, you have to be passionate about it. And I found in life that unless you're truly passionate about something, you can't sell it to other people. Your conviction has to come from your passion. And, I think also, and this might sound a little bit strange, but it almost is easier to do something when you don't have too much information. And don't get me wrong, I'm not saying that you have to be completely clueless when you enter something new, but if you go into it knowing that your gut is telling you that it's the right thing to do and you're passionate about it, if you have too much information, you might talk yourself out of it. And so obviously you will make mistakes if you don't have all the information. But again, if you're going to learn from your mistakes and recover, that's the best way to get things done. And be very wary of conventional wisdom. Be very wary what the established business elite tells you about what can and can't be done. Human nature is such that people fear change. And so if you come forward with a new idea that's outside of the norm and you go to an expert in your field, their likely reaction will be it can't be done, because it scares them that with change, their position, their role in life becomes threatened. And so I've always, mostly ignored other people when they've tried to give me their opinions about, and especially when they say it can't be done. That one drives me crazy. Ask anybody that I work with. When we sit around the room and someone says, well, it can't be done, I said, no, don't tell me that. Tell me there's a challenge. Tell me there's an obstacle. But for God's sake, don't tell me it can't be done, because that is simply not true. Everything can be done. And so I think you have to really be careful when you ask too many people of their opinions.
Right.
You're going to get opinions that are probably going to deter you from doing something really bold and great.
Can't be done sounds like almost every network pitch I've ever been in. So you really are made for the media business. We need more people like you to say it can't be done. I have a couple more, and then we'll wrap it up. One was is asking you kind of what film and TV you like, and what do you watch unprofessionally, just in your free time.
Well, I have two small kids, so I watch a lot of Nemo and Madagascar and The Incredibles and Ice Age, and I can probably quote a lot of lines from those movies. I seem to watch more of those movies than anything else. But for my own personal entertainment, I love movies more than television. I have to admit that. I grew up watching movies, everything from silent movies to the MGM musicals, right up to the 1950s epic movies, all along. I used to lock myself up in an apartment for a weekend just watching movies. It's something I truly, truly love. And I've got some, everybody has their favorites. There are just so many, it's hard. But there's one that sticks out because it was the first movie I ever saw in Canada when I moved here from Argentina. I was 9 years old. It was 1966. And my parents took me to Dr. Zhivago. And I remember sitting there not speaking a word of English, looking at this magnificent film, great cinematography, great musical score, all these crazy things going on, not knowing what was going on and going, wow, this is a great movie. And I've watched it ever since, and it's remained one of my favorite movies of all time. Blade Runner, hence why we own half of it. I think I've seen that movie so many times. It's a brilliant movie. As far as television, I'm more into the original programming from the cable networks.
Mm-hmm.
I think that stuff is fabulous, and it's gritty, it's entertaining, it's really well done. Things like Sopranos and the miniseries like Rome, that sort of stuff is great. But I don't want to offend anybody, but I think most of the stuff that I see on television is mindless crap. And by the way, and that's with all due respect to all you producers of mindless crap out there. But you're obviously doing something right. People are watching it. There's an audience for it. So, continue, but I can't take it.
Fair enough. After we talked last night a little more about your olive oil and enjoyed it at our dinner, you hinted to me that this was just the beginning of yet another business chapter fueled by passion and maybe a little serendipity. So maybe to wrap up our chat, you want to tell us about the next thing, the next big thing.
Food. It's all about food. And it came about from this oil. I've spent the last 2 years researching, reading, interviewing people, traveling, tasting, having sessions, doing market research, learning about all of the dynamics of food. And although I can't tell you specifically what we're going to launch, I will tell you that it's something that I really believe in. I believe in great food. I think when you've tasted great food, you can't go back to mediocre food. And I don't think we all have access to great food. I think as a nation, we are mostly subjected to either really bad foods or mediocre foods. And what I want to do is something that brings to everybody the best of the best. I've got farms going, I've got all sorts of things going that will do that. And it's a personal passion because I appreciate really great food. And I love learning. And so this learning experience, this learning curve the last 2 years, it's been absolutely fascinating. The stuff that you learn about food that you had no idea about. It's great stuff.
You named the olive oil after your mom, and then you brought her a bottle and surprised her. You didn't tell her. What's the role of family? I mean, your mom is still a huge presence in your life. She's now famous for her olive oil and other things. How much credit do you give to your upbringing and your background to where you are today.
Yeah, well, as I said earlier, I grew up on, we didn't have a lot of money. My father was a laborer and came to this country, without any money and had to sort of work his way through putting 4 kids through school. My mother spent her life in the kitchen, and her entire desire for life was to take care of her children. It's all she cared about. I mean, we tried to talk her into getting part-time work just to get out of the house, and she would never do it. But I grew up with great meals, and I grew up in a family meal setting, and even when we left home, if you were in town, and this is when my parents were still active and could cook, and if you were in town, you did not have an excuse to not show up for Sunday dinner. And it was always, 20 people, you brought your friends, and everybody's around, and it's very noisy. And very noisy because there's lots of wine being drank, and lots of great food, and it gets the level of noise really starts going. But it's fun. It's a great way, as I said earlier, if you haven't tried it, as a means of entertaining friends, and instead of going out to a restaurant, just try cooking and just bring friends over and have everybody hang around the kitchen while you're cooking and order them around, make them do things. Chop this, get that. It's fun. And it's that big influence on my life, the quality of food. My dad is an absolute snob when it comes to vegetables, or any cooked food. He hates everything. His idea of a compliment is it's not bad. And so, yeah, now I'm into pizza. I started baking. I got this great pizza oven, which I brought over from Italy, from Naples, and it makes the best pizzas in the world. And now I'm making pizzas, and they are, seriously, and I'm saying this because it's true. They're the best pizzas I've ever tasted, and they're finished with the olive oil, and with great ingredients, and it's so much fun. And the reason I said this is because I had my father and mother over for Mother's Day, and I made them this pizza. And my father, whose idea of a compliment is not bad, actually sat there eating this pizza going, this is the best pizza I've ever tasted. All the kids were all looking at each other going, this is different.
That's great. Well, Frank, thank you so much for sharing all of these stories and the information and how you got to where you are. You're an inspiration to all of us within the company and outside of it, and we appreciate it.
You're welcome.
Thank all of you.